The NFL 2024 free agency period so far has been absolutely wild, and there have been a number of high profile moves throughout the league, both in trades and in signings. So, of course, we're going to cover it here on the Sports Ball Network. And in this video, I'll be giving my thoughts on every single team's free agency and grading them out. With that being said, let's kick things off here. I'll start in the AFC East with the Buffalo Bills and then work my way through all 32 NFL teams. This is the Sports Ball Network, and this is our 2024 NFL free agency breakdown. Looking at the Buffalo Bills, they've lost quite a few key contributors in free agency, specifically on the defensive side. They lost Gabe Davis at wide receiver, Ryan Bates and Mitch Morse on the offensive line. Defense, they lost Leonard Floyd, Linval Joseph, Jordan Phillips, Tre'Davious White, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. So quite a few starters there. They did sign quarterback Mitch Trubisky, wide receivers Matt Collins and Curtis Samuel, an offensive tackle Deion Dawkins. He re-upped on his deal. Offensive guard David Edwards extended. On the edge, they added AJ Espinoza on a 2-year deal, re-signing with the team. Defensive tackle Daquan Jones re-signed. Linebacker Nicholas Morrow signed. Cam Lewis at cornerback re-signed. And safety Taylor Rapp re-signed. Buffalo was in a tight cap situation, so losing a lot of players, particularly on the defensive side, was bound to happen. They did do a good job in keeping some of those key guys, adding a couple impact players in Curtis Samuel and Mac Hollins. But otherwise, nothing really of note here for Buffalo. They were, again, going to lose quite a few guys. They couldn't keep everybody due to their cap situation. But overall, I'd say they did a pretty decent job in keeping the guys that they needed to and bringing in a couple more guys to continue to be competitive. I'd probably, right now, if I had to grade them, give them a B minus. For the Miami Dolphins, like the Buffalo Bills, this free agency was one where they had to offload a lot of contracts to ensure they were complying with the cap. So guys like Isaiah Wynn on the offensive line, Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram, Andrew Van Ginkel, Emmanuel Agba, all defensive ends that had to be let go. Christian Wilkins was lost in free agency on the defensive line. That's a big loss for the team. Xavier Howard at cornerback, Jerome Baker at linebacker, Deshaun Elliott, Brandon Jones at safety. All guys Miami had to let go in free agency. They did bring in a couple guys. Jonnu Smith at tight end signed a 2-year deal. Neville Gallimore signed a deal to help replace Christian Wilkins on the defensive line. Shaq Barrett also joins. Kendall Fuller, a nice grab at cornerback for this team. Jordan Poyer, a good grab at safety as well. But again, Miami lost a lot of guys in free agency, like the Bills. They weren't in a situation where they could bring a lot of them back. And as a result, they have not had an absolute standout free agency. Now, they haven't had a terrible free agency period either, but losing guys like Andrew Van Ginkel, Christian Wilkins, Jerome Baker is not ideal for the team. And as a result, I can't really give them anything more than like a B or a B minus here. The New England Patriots are really, really active in free agency so far. They traded Mac Jones to the Jaguars, of course, but they signed quarterback Jacoby Brissett to replace him. They also brought in guys like Antonio Gibson. They re-signed Kendrick Bourne and Hunter Henry and Chukwuma Okafor. Mike Owenu re-signed with the team. Anthony Jennings re-signed. Josh Uche re-signed. Kyle Duggar had the transition tag. So the Patriots definitely were buyers. Of course, they did lose guys like Mike Gesicki, Trent Brown, Riley Reef, Miles Bryant, J.C. Jackson, Jalen Mill, Matthew Slater retired. So there were some losses for this team, but you can see the vision on what the Patriots are trying to do. They're trying to keep some of their younger core guys as they build this thing up. Of course, Patriots did not have a good season last year. They have the number 3 pick in the draft, a new head coach. We expect them to take a quarterback. And it's the types of moves that they're making right now, keeping Kendrick Bourne, signing Antonio Gibson, re-signing Hunter Henry, signing guys on the offensive line, shoring up the defense a little bit. That makes me think that they're really trying to build up an environment for whoever lands in New England. I like what the Patriots have done so far. It's not perfect. Obviously, losing some guys like Riley Reef, Jalen Mills, not ideal, but certainly it could have been worse for New England. And overall, I like what they're building there so far. I'll give them a B plus here. The New York Jets have not done a ton in free agency. Little bit confusing to me considering that we saw last year that this team had a number of holes that they really needed to fill once Aaron Rodgers comes back. If Aaron Rodgers comes back, more on that in a second. So that way they could be competitive. They lost guys like CJ Zuma, Mekhi Becton, Dwayne Brown, Billy Turner, Connor McGovern on the offense. Bryce Huff went to the Eagles. Carl Lawson, Solomon Thomas, Quentin Jefferson, all free agents. Bryce Hall and Jordan Whitehead went to the Buccaneers. Meanwhile, the Jets only really did a couple things in free agency. They acquired Morgan Moses in a trade. I like that a lot. John Simpson signed with the team. Leki Fotu signed. Javon Kinlaw also signed with the Jets. Isaiah Oliver. All good deals, but not really enough to replace the amount of players and talent and depth that the Jets are losing right now. And of course, I mentioned it a little earlier. I'm going to talk about it here now. There's a lot of noise around Aaron Rodgers possibly running for vice president of the United States. Yeah, that's a real thing I just said. Aaron Rodgers could, in fact, run for vice president in 2024. And I'm just going to leave it at that. In terms of a free agency grade, I'd give the Jets like a C or a C minus. Again, I like the signings and the acquisitions they have made, but they just lost a lot of players and a lot of depth, and they have not brought in a lot of replacements here when they probably should be and should be looking to retool more than they have so far. So when we're talking about the Baltimore Ravens free agency, we have to get this out of the way. Derrick Henry signed a 2-year deal with the team. I think it's a great signing. He's been linked to the Ravens for a long time. I think it's a great location. He'll do great there. That being said, Baltimore has not done much else here. They really have lost quite a few guys. Gus Edwards goes to the Chargers. Morgan Moses, he was traded to the Jets. John Simpson also goes to the Jets. Kevin Zeitler is a free agent right now. Davion Clowney, Kyle Van Noy, Belshon Phillips goes to the Texans. Patrick Queen to the Steelers. That's a big blow. Geno Stone to the Bengals. Also a big blow. Ravens did re-sign Nelson Aguilar to a 1-year extension. That's fine. Justin Madubuike re-signed on a 4-year deal. Great signing by the Ravens, but not much else. And like with the Jets, Baltimore's losing a lot of talent. I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with Baltimore just doing so little in free agency when we saw how they collapsed in the playoffs at the end of the year in the AFC Championship game. And in the AFC, of course, you're going to need to make moves to compete with Patrick Mahomes. Baltimore has Lamar Jackson. They should be looking to compete right now. I'm not sure what they're doing is going to help them do that. But hey, who knows? I'm not an NFL GM. That being said, like with the Jets, I'm going to give this one like a C or a C minus so far. Of course, Baltimore could do stuff later down the line, but as of now, they really have not done a lot in free agency outside of the Derrick Henry signing and the Justin Madubuike extension. Bengals, after a disappointing 2023 season, have been very, very active in free agency. They franchise tag T. Higgins. He's requested a trade. Not sure that's going to happen, though. The Bengals have a ton of leverage over him, so chances are he'll be playing with them for at least one more year. They signed running back Zach Moss, traded Joe Mixon to the Texans. Uh, they did lose offensive tackle Jonah Williams to the Cardinals. DJ Reader signed with the Lions. Chidobe Azui signed with the Titans. But the Bengals also brought in guys like Mike Gesicki. I thought that was a really good deal for them. Cody Ford, Sheldon Rankins, Von Bell, and of course, they snagged Geno Stone from the Ravens. Clearly, Cincinnati is looking to kind of build up their offense for one more run. I mean, they signed 3 tight ends. They're keeping T. Higgins around. They're retooling the running back room. And they're also at the same time building up the defense a little bit, particularly in the secondary with the signings of Von Bell and Geno Stone. I like what the Bengals have done so far. I'll give them a solid B plus as long as they keep up what they're doing and keep adding guys to this team that could really contribute this year. I see no reason why they would not compete for the AFC. Cleveland is one of the more interesting teams in free agency. They signed Jameis Winston. They traded for Jerry Jeudy. Re-signed Adam Trotman at tight end. Brought in Darius Smith on the edge to pair with Myles Garrett. Re-signed Shelby Harris. Brought in Devin Bush and Jordan Hicks to shore up the linebackers. Really like what they're doing so far. Of course, they also lost center Nick Harris. A lot of contributors on the defense. Taki went to the Patriots. Anthony Walker went to the Dolphins. Jordan Harmon, Rodney McLeod are both free agents. Jordan Elliott goes to the Niners. But it's very clear Cleveland is looking to load up. They feel like they can compete in the AFC. And really, what Cleveland's free agency moves are telling me is that they're putting it all on Deshaun Watson this year. They bring in Jerry Jeudy. They're shoring up the defense, making sure that that unit will likely be a top 10 unit once more. Obviously, they have a ton of talent already. They'll add more into the draft. Like what they've done so far. That being said, they haven't done like anything super splashy, but they have had some pretty good moves here. Solid B. And of course, all of Cleveland's hopes for the 2024 season will hinge on Deshaun Watson. And if he's able to perform well, sky's the limit for them. And these free agent moves are only looking to support that. The Pittsburgh Steelers have been surprisingly active in free agency. Of course, they lost quite a few guys here. They traded Kenny Pickett to the Eagles. We'll talk about that more when we get to the Eagles. Traded Deontay Johnson to the Panthers. Lost center Mason Cole, offensive tackle Chiguma Orikafor. On the defense, they lost a few guys. Quan Alexander, Patrick Peterson, Keanu Neal are some of the guys. Of course, they also brought in Patrick Queen, stole him from Baltimore. That's a great move. Dante Jackson, they acquired in a trade. I like that a lot. Deshaun Elliott signed with the team. But The big one is the Russell Wilson signing. He's going to sign with the Steelers 1 year for the league minimum. Pittsburgh won't have to pay his salary at all. Denver will. And I really, really like this offseason for Pittsburgh. I think they've improved the team in a number of spots, particularly at quarterback. That will have a ripple effect. Russ is going to be infinitely better than whatever Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph were last year. Uh, really like it. And I think if the Steelers draft well, they continue to add some guys in the second wave of free agency. I don't see why they would not be competitive in the AFC once more. I'll actually go ahead and give the Steelers our first A grade of free agency, particularly because I really, really like the signing of Russell Wilson and really like the signing of Patrick Queen. And I think that those guys could potentially have a really, really sized impact on the team going forward. Moving down to the AFC South, Houston Texans have been very active in free agency. Re-signed Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz, graded for Joe Mixon, brought in Danielle Hunter on the edge, Delshon Phillips, linebacker, a ton of corners, including Desmond King and Jeff Paducah. Eric Murray at safety. They signed kicker Tammy Fairbairn on an extension. Of course, they lost Jonathan Grenard. That's not great. They also lost Malik Collins in a trade to the 49ers, Sheldon Rankins to the Bengals. But man, Houston has been very active. They're loading up on defense. They brought in some more talent on the offense to support CJ Stroud. Really, really like what they're doing. Clearly, they're building around the fact that they have a franchise quarterback. They're going all in here, and can't help but love it. Gonna give Houston an A here. The Indianapolis Colts did not have a lot of guys hitting free agency. Only real guys of note here are quarterback Gardner Minshew, running back Zach Moss, wide receiver Isaiah McKenzie, edge Jake Martin, defensive line Taven Bryan, and safety Julian Blackman. They brought in a lot of guys here. Joe Flacco to back up Anthony Richardson. I really like that. Genard Avery, Raekwon Davis on the defensive line. Zaire Franklin extended. Ronnie Harrison signed. The big one, of course, though, is Michael Pittman. He signed an extension with the team after receiving the franchise tag. Lock him in. He'll be the support blanket for Anthony Richardson as he continues to develop. Love what the Colts have done. Like with the past couple teams I've evaluated, I think they've done a great job adding talent, building up, adding leaders, and really working towards a vision. That being said, it's not perfect, but I think it's really good. I'll give Indianapolis an A minus here so far in free agency. I'm a bit confused with a little bit of what Jacksonville is doing here. They let Calvin Ridley walk to the Titans. Brandon McManus, their kicker, who's pretty good, goes to the Commanders now. Trey Herndon at cornerback is a free agent. Palavon Chison goes to the Panthers at edge. Center Tyler Shatley is a free agent. Those are just a few of the names. Meanwhile, Jacksonville brings in quarterback Mac Jones in a trade. They bring in Gabe Davis to replace Calvin Ridley, Devin Duvernay as well. They do sign center Mitch Morse. Really like that. Josh Allen received a non-exclusive franchise tag. Eric Armstead signed with the team. Ronald Darby, Darnell Savage. There are some good names here. Art Armstead, Ronald Darby, Darnell Savage, Mitch Morse. But I'm a bit confused on why they brought in Mac Jones. I mean, obviously, backup quarterback's really important, but Mac Jones has not really shown that he has that type of ability in the NFL. Gabe Davis was another signing that perplexed me a little bit. They already have Christian Kirk. They have Zay Jones. They had Calvin Ridley. Of course, they lost him, but Gabe Davis does not do the things that Calvin does. Uh, I mean, Jacksonville did add talent, particularly on the defense, but they also lost quite a bit of talent here. They brought in a couple guys that I'm not sure will fit on the team. And to be honest, I don't really love what the Jaguars have done here in free agency, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. To me, right now, if I had to give them a grade, I'd probably give them like a C or a C minus. The Tennessee Titans have a vision here, and it's not one that people would expect. Normally, when you think of the Tennessee Titans, you think of hard nosed, run the ball up the middle type football. But with their free agency class, they brought in guys like Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley on the offense, Shadiq Charles on the offensive line, Lloyd Cushenberry signed a deal with the team. Uh, these types of signings are not like traditional Tennessee Titan signings, if you get what I mean here. They let guys like Derrick Henry, Andre Dillard, Chris Hubbard walk. On the defense, Aziz Al Shahir went to the Texans, Sean Murphy Bunting to the Cardinals, Kevon Wallace, Terrell Edmonds all walk. But clearly, Tennessee is looking to redefine itself as a pass first, high octane offense with a lot of speed and flexibility. That's why they brought in guys like Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley. On the defense, only guys they really brought in were Kenneth Murray, Chidobe Awuzie. Expect them to draft a lot of guys on that side of the ball. They do need to replace quite a few starters and depth guys. Nick Folk signed a kicker. And really, for Tennessee, the free agency is going to come down to how the offense looks. I think they believe in quarterback Will Levis. Otherwise, they wouldn't be making moves like bringing in guys like Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley. They wouldn't re-sign Nick Westbrook Akeem. But I'm not sure whether or not that belief is properly placed. Will Levis did show potential last year, but he also showed a lot of flaws. And it's going to be very interesting to see where the 2024 Tennessee Titans end up. I do appreciate that they are building towards something in Tennessee. They do have a vision, but of course, that vision all goes back to quarterback Will Levis, and I'm not sure if he's the guy. So for now, I'll give the Tennessee Titans like a B minus for their free agency. Again, really like what they're building towards, but I'm not sure if they have the guy under center to build that around, which is why I don't grade them any higher. I think after the dust on free agency settles, people will widely consider the Denver Broncos to be the worst team in the NFL, or if not the worst team, alongside teams like the Giants and the Panthers. Denver clearly is a seller in free agency. They traded Jerry Jeudy. They let Justin Simmons go. Fabian Moreau, cornerback, is also gone. But the big one is Denver eating $85 million over the next 2 years to not have Russell Wilson play on their team. Russ was far from perfect in Denver, but he could have been way worse. And for the team to eat $85 million just to let him go, I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. Of course, this signifies Denver's going into a full-on rebuild. Uh, and so, because of that, they have not really brought in a lot of guys. Only guy on this list I could really see of note is kicker Will Lutz, who re-signed in Denver. Free agency, not great for the Broncos. Obviously, they let go a lot of talent, or they traded a lot of talent. They're starting over, but that's to be expected. Still, going to give them a D here. They have not done a lot, and they are clearly setting themselves up for a down year in 2024. It's been a mixed bag so far for the defending Super Bowl champs in free agency, in my opinion. They brought in some wide receiver help in Marquise Brown. I do like that deal on a 1 year, $11 million prove it. Chris Jones re signed, of course. Derek Nanati re signed. L'Jarius Sneed received the franchise tag. Of course, he's requested a trade. We'll see how that goes. Deion Bush re signs. They bring in punter Matt Araiza. Like that move. But they also lost punter Tommy Townsend, linebacker Willie Gay Jr., safety Mike Edwards, center Nick Allegretti, Donovan Smith on the offensive line. So it's been a mixed bag. They've lost some of their talent. They did bring in some new talent, but mostly for the Chiefs, they've been trying to keep their core together. I think a lot of Kansas City's free agency will hinge on what happens with L'Jarius Sneed, whether or not he ends up revoking his trade request and re-signing, or if he goes somewhere else. So for now, I'll give the Kansas City Chiefs a C. They did bring in some guys like Marquise Brown. They re-signed guys like Chris Jones, but they did also lose talent. And depending on what happens with L'Jarius Sneed, they could be set to lose a little bit more. The Raiders have made a couple big splashes in free agency in signing quarterback Gardner Minshew to a 2-year deal and defensive lineman Christian Wilkins from the Dolphins on a 4-year, $110 million mega contract. But for the most part, they have lost some talent. Running back Josh Jacobs went to the Packers. They cut wide receiver Hunter Renfrow. Austin Hooper, a tight end, goes to the Patriots. Jermaine Alunamunor goes to the Giants. Greg Van Rotten is not on the team right now. Jerry Tillery went to the Vikings. John Jennings is a free agent. Bilal Nichols went to the Cardinals. Nick Robertson, a cornerback, goes to the Lions. So, for the most part, the Raiders lost a lot of guys. That being said, they got the best defensive lineman on the market. That's a big win for them. He'll pair very nicely with Max Crosby. But overall, Raiders do lose some depth. They're going to need to replace that in the draft. And with their free agency, outside of the Christian Wilkins and the Gardner Minshew signings, they have not really done a lot. So, like with a few of the teams on this list, I'll be giving them a C here. Of course, they could bring in some depth in coming weeks before their draft, but for the most part, outside of the two big signings, they really have not much here in free agency. Really don't understand what the Chargers are doing right now. I mean, some moves I get, like cutting Mike Williams, that was a cap casualty. I understand that. It was going to be potentially him or Khalil Mack, who ended up restructuring his deal. That's fine. Letting guys like Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett, Nick Vanette, Will Clapp, Eric Kendricks, Jalen Hawkins go. Like, I understand. Like, the Chargers were not in a great position cap wise. But there are some things that I don't understand what the Chargers are doing. Like they traded Keenan Allen after asking him to take a pay cut after they were already under the cap. They did not need to do that. That made no sense to me. Uh, they only really have signed Gus Edwards, Will Dissly, Hayden Hurst. They re-signed Easton Stick. They re-signed Wallahi Gilman, but they have not really done anything outside of just bleed their talent away, which again, I kind of get. I mean, guys like Austin Eckler were on the older side, going to need to retool, but the Chargers haven't done anything outside of sign Gus Edwards and re-sign a couple of their own free agents, which does not make sense to me. You have Justin Herbert, and he's going to want to win. And I understand Coach Jim Harbaugh is going to want to install his culture, install his schemes. But again, like nothing here is pointing to the Chargers looking to compete in 2024. So you're essentially going to waste your all pro quarterback's prime by a year. It doesn't make any sense to me. At the very least, I would have expected the Chargers to do a little bit more to support Justin Herbert here. Maybe they'll do that in the draft. But for now, I can't view this free agency as anything other than just a massive failure for the Chargers. They have not done anything to support Justin Herbert. They're making themselves way worse than they need to be. And again, I understand ripping it down to the studs, but you also have an all pro quarterback whose prime you're wasting. So it does not make sense to me. Chargers right now, they get an F. They get an F for me. I can't really give them anything else because I don't understand what they're doing at all. You know, I really like the Cowboys going all in, actually, guys, because they don't do anything when they go all in. They lost guys like Neville Gallimore, uh, Tyler Badatz. Tyron Smith is not re signed yet. They cut Michael Gallup. Rico Dowdle, Tony Pollard are both gone. Jonathan Hankins is gone. Stephon Gilmore gone. Just the Cowboys, when they go all in, they lose a lot of talent and they only make 3 free agent signings, the least of any NFL team, and only bring in 1 free agent outside of the team in Eric Kendricks. As an Eagles fan, I give this free agency for Dallas an A+. They could not have done anything better in my eyes. As an impartial, though, I mean, what is Dallas doing? I mean, I get you're going to need to lose some guys in free agency. They were paying a lot of money last year. That's obviously going to have consequences this year, but this is your definition of going all in after a very disappointing loss in the playoffs. It doesn't make sense to me. I would imagine you'd want to retool and at least bring in a couple guys to supplement your draft class. But to bring in nobody, that just does not make sense to me. I'll give the Dallas Cowboys an F here. Pretty straightforward. They have, quite frankly, done nothing in free agency, and I don't know what they're thinking right now. Let's move on. Real quick here, before I move on with the rest of the video, as I was recording, just got news that offensive tackle Tyron Smith of the Dallas Cowboys ended up signing with the New York Jets. I think that's a really good move for the Jets here. Of course, I don't think it really changes my grade much. I do think the Jets need to be doing more to solidify the roster and build up some talent so that way they can compete. But great signing for the Jets here. Really, though, I think this is more impactful for the Cowboys. They lose a great player. A lot of Cowboys fans were upset with how the team was handling free agency. That being said, they were also talking about if they brought back Tyron Smith, it probably would have ended up okay. But at this point, if you're a Cowboys fan, you just have to be really upset with how things are going. And I think that one just really solidifies that grade that I gave them of F. They have not done anything. They're kind of just losing talent here after a disappointing year where they should be looking to bring in talent and retool their roster so that they can continue to compete. Because Cowboys right now aren't really in a position to rebuild. They have enough star power on the roster to compete. So rather than just like sitting pat, I think they should be augmenting it a little bit more. But so far they haven't. And again, as a result, I can't help but give them an F here. All right, let's move on now to the New York Giants. The New York Giants, of course, lost Saquon Barkley in free agency to the Eagles. They also lost Xavier McKinney to the Packers and A'Shawn Robinson to the Panthers. But at the same time, they had some pretty good signings here. They bring in Drew Lock on a 1-year, $5 million deal to essentially compete with or possibly supplant Daniel Jones. Running back Devin Singletary signs for a reasonable deal. Isaiah McKenzie's brought in to help the wide receiver room. John Runyon signs with the team. And of course, the Giants trade for Brian Burns and give him a huge 5-year, $150 million deal. Giants are not in a position to compete right now. It's very evident. If you follow the team, you'll hear a lot of they really are looking towards 2025, 2026. They want to move on from Daniel Jones, and they're building up the team and the trenches now. Moves like John Runyon signing the Brian Burns trade solidify that. However, losing guys like A'Shawn Robinson hurts. They also lost Justin Pugh in free agency. But overall, not bad, the New York Giants, despite them losing some of their more well-known names, particularly Saquon and Xavier McKinney. I think they've done a pretty decent job here. They haven't been great, but I think they could have done a much worse job, all things considered. Because of that, I'll be giving them a C+. Imagine that a lot of you think I'm probably going to be heaping praise on Howie Roseman and how the Eagles have had an amazing free agency and so on and so forth. But I'm not going to do that. Of course, the Eagles did lose some guys. DeAndre Swift goes to the Bears. Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox retired. That's going to hurt. Vontae Maddox, Kevin Byard are free agents as well. Those are just some of the highlights. That being said, they did bring in a lot of talent. Saquon was brought in. I imagine the Eagles want to use him like how the Niners used CMC. I think that was a phenomenal move. The Eagles did need running back badly. Landon Dickerson signs an extension. I really like that as well. Matt Hennessy is brought in like that. Brandon Graham re-signs on a 1-year deal. The Eagles bring in Bryce Huff. That's a great move. Devin White signing a 1-year contract is great. Jake Elliott extended. A lot of good moves by Philadelphia. Don't get me wrong. But there are some moves here that I'm questioning. We're unsure why we're bringing in Devontae Parker on a 1-year deal. I don't necessarily agree with re-signing CJ Gardner-Johnson on a 3-year deal. And the Kenny Pickett trade that occurred earlier on Friday, I just don't agree with. The Eagles traded a 3rd rounder and 2 7th rounders in 2025 for Kenny Pickett and a 2024 4th round pick. Kenny Pickett's not good quarterback. He threw 6 touchdowns in 12 games. I'm not sure what the Eagles are thinking here. They might be thinking that he's a backup or a guy that they could develop, but honestly, anybody who's watched the Steelers can immediately tell you that he's not good at all. I agree with that. So in my eyes, I view this trade as the Eagles giving up a 3rd rounder and 2 7th rounders for a 2024 4th rounder, and I do not like it at all. As far as if Kenny Pickett does develop a little bit, it's a decent deal, but I don't like it for the most part. And again, the Eagles have had a pretty decent free agency. They made a lot of moves I like. There were some I disliked, but there are more that I do like here. I will be giving them an A minus or a B plus. It's not perfect, but it's been a pretty good free agency for Philadelphia so far as they look to reestablish themselves on top of the NFC. I really like what the Commanders have done in free agency so far. I really do. Bringing veteran guys like Austin Eckler and Zach Ertz on smaller deals. Nick Allegretti and Tyler Badatz on the line to help shore things up there. On the defensive side, bringing in Dorrance Armstrong, Clendon Farrell, Dante Fowler Jr., F.A. Obada, linebacker, frankly, Luvu, Bobby Wagner, safety Jeremy Chin, a really underrated signing. Kicker Brandon McManus. The Commanders, I think, are doing it right. They're building on the trenches here. They signed in quite a few free agents, trying to establish a culture for themselves as well. They have the number 2 overall pick. They're going to take a quarterback. They also bring in quarterback Marcus Mariota as a potential bridge and mentor for that guy. They did trade Sam Howell to the Seahawks. I like that move for both sides. They lose Antonio Gibson, lose Curtis Samuel, lose Shadiq Charles. But I do think for the most part, the Commanders have done a great job. Really underrated free agency here, bringing in a number of veteran guys who can really contribute while also helping to establish a winning culture for this team, which has not had that in a very, very long time. Commanders to me have one of the better free agencies so far. Give them an A here. I think they've done a great job. And I think a lot of these guys that they signed will end up being quality contributors for them this year and potentially down the line as they build themselves from the ground up. If you had to ask people who the winner of free agency is so far, a lot of them would say the Chicago Bears. And to be honest, I kind of agree. They haven't really lost anyone of note here. Maybe offensive guard Dan Feeney, who went to the Vikings, Justin Jones to the Cardinals, and Eddie Jackson at safety. Yannick Ngakoue, I guess, is also another guy who was a quality contributor who's now gone. They traded Darnell Mooney to the Falcons. But for Chicago, it's been all about the additions. Adding DeAndre Swift, trading for Keenan Allen, signing Ryan Bates, Matt Pryor, bringing in Gerald Everett, signing Kevin Byard, Jonathan Owens. Just fantastic moves, particularly on the offense, where they're building up quite an offensive arsenal for the presumed number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams. The only thing Chicago really hasn't been able to do, though, is trade quarterback Justin Fields, who pretty much has a non-existent market, which kind of makes sense to me and it kind of doesn't. I think Justin Fields has more potential than guys like Kenny Pickett and maybe Sam Howell. But I also, based on what I've heard, would not be willing to pay like a second round or a low first round pick to the Bears for said potential, especially given that Justin Fields has not really produced at all. I think if Chicago lowers their asking price, they would be able to trade Fields, and I would say their offseason is just a major win for them. But until they do trade Fields, they're going to have that looming over them. Still love what Chicago has done. I think they're really building themselves up. They could possibly be competitive this year if Caleb Williams is as good as everyone thinks he is going to be. Bears, to me, get an A, maybe an A plus in free agency. I think they've had a phenomenal 2024 so far. I mentioned at the end of last season when Detroit lost the NFC Championship game, they really needed to focus on their defense. And clearly they watched my video because that is exactly what they have done in free agency. Detroit didn't have a lot of free agents leaving. They have Josh Reynolds at wide receiver, Jonah Jackson at offensive guard. Uh, Other than that, not a ton of high impact guys on this roster. They re-signed Graham Glasgow, great signing by them. They bring in Dan Skipper, but the focus of this team has been on defense, bringing in Marcus Davenport, signing DJ Reader, trading for Carlton Davis, signing Emick Robertson, Emmanuel Mosley. Just a really, really important free agency for Detroit if they wanted to remain competitive in the NFC North. I think what they did was really good. They re-upped on their offensive guard, and then they just brought in a bunch of defensive talent, particularly along the line, which they absolutely needed. Uh, really like what Detroit did. I'm going to give them an A minus here. I think they did what they had to do. And going into next year, they should absolutely be competitive once more and possibly could end up representing the NFC in the Super Bowl if things break right. Packers had a pretty good free agency so far. Obviously, the big signing for them is running back Josh Jacobs, who signed a 4-year, $48 million deal. That was followed by running back Aaron Jones being cut from the team. Something to note, A.J. Dillon also resigns with the Packers here. Could be interesting, but Packers have a great 1-2 backfield. Once more, John Runyon goes to the Giants. They lose him at offensive guard. That's not great. Neither is losing Darnell Savage to the Jaguars. But Packers did re-sign Corey Ballantyne, and of course they bring in Xavier McKinney, who is an upgrade over Darnell Savage. Like what the Packers have done, typically they're a team just because of how they're constructed and how their finances work that don't spend big in free agency. So it makes sense for them to lose guys like John Runyon and Darnell Savage. But clearly, they have taken a different approach this year. They brought in Josh Jacobs. They re-signed Corey Ballantyne. They bring in Xavier McKinney. And to me, that kind of signals that they really want to support Jordan Love and continue to build up the team, bring in some veterans so that way they can compete. Packers, again, had the youngest team in the league last year. So bringing these guys is very important to help them continue to establish a winning culture and give them more of a veteran presence. Really like what they're doing here. And although they haven't made a ton of moves, just the way they're constructed and how their whole team operates kind of helps explain that. And the moves they did make, I really like. I think the Packers overall have had a good free agency so far. I'll give them a B plus here. The Minnesota Vikings right now are in a transition period, and the way they conducted their free agency kind of reflects that. They obviously lose Kirk Cousins. That's a major loss for them. You can't just replace an all-pro level quarterback. They don't grow on trees. They also lost edge rushers Marcus Davenport to the division rival Detroit Lions and Danielle Hunter to the Texans. Again, not great. Quality edge rushers also don't grow on trees. They lost linebacker Jordan Hicks to the Browns. But they did bring in Aaron Jones on a 1-year, $7 million deal. I think that's a good value. They signed offensive tackle David Quesenberry to an extension. Jonathan Bernard, they obviously signed him. That was a good deal for them. Andrew Van Ginkel, they also bring in. The Vikings also traded for the 23rd overall pick, trading with the Houston Texans. So now they have 2 first-rounders in the draft. That to me indicates they're going to potentially either package that to move up for a quarterback or continue to build up this roster and prepare to bring one in over the next year or so. Losing Kirk Cousins and some of those guys on the defense, obviously not great for Minnesota. They did bring in a couple really quality guys in Aaron Jones, Jonathan Bernard. But to me, just the way the Vikings have gone about free agency, adding some pieces to replace the guys they've lost, adding a draft pick, just indicates to me they're in a transition. They're still kind of deciding what they want to do. If they were in a full rebuild, they would not be signing guys like Jonathan Bernard or Aaron Jones. But at the same time, if they wanted to really compete, I think they would have done whatever it took to keep Kirk Cousins. This is about as middle of the pack as free agency can be in my mind. Because of that, I'll give the Vikings a C plus here. They've done some good things. They've done some not so good things, and I'm just not sure what the team is doing in terms of the direction they want to go. And it's going to be very interesting to see what path they take for the rest of free agency and into the draft. For the Atlanta Falcons, the only thing that matters for them in free agency is Kirk Cousins, who signed a 4-year, $180 million deal with them with $100 million guaranteed. If Kirk goes back to his all pro level play, this free agency is an A plus for Atlanta. If he ends up regressing, or if he ends up too hurt to really play beyond this year or maybe next, it's an F minus. There's really no in between. That being said, the Falcons did add Darnell Mooney on a 3-year deal to augment the offense around Kirk. They brought in a fantastic blocking tight end, Charlie Warner, Storm Norton at offensive tackle. But again, only thing that matters here is the Kirk Cousins signing. And for now, I think Kirk will get back to the level he was playing at. So I'll give the Falcons an A here. But of course, if he does not, that grade flips on its head. It's suddenly an F. Carolina entered free agency as the worst team in the NFL, but leaves it still probably as one of the worst teams in the NFL, but a slightly better version of themselves. Couple things I really like that this team did was trade for Deontay Johnson. I think he's going to be a fantastic addition here. Gives Bryce Young a true bona fide target for him to develop with. Ashawn Robinson at defensive tackle was also a great signing as well. Jordan Fuller at safety, Troy Hill re-signing with the team, I think are also some highlights. Carolina didn't have a ton of talent outside of Brian Burns that they lost. They traded Brian Burns to the Giants for an okay return. Of course, 2 years ago, that would have been 3 first-round picks, so not great, but they did get something for him. Carolina, to me, has had a pretty okay free agency. They did get better, but they're still not a very good team in my eyes. And because of that, I'll be giving them a C. For those who believe that the cap is not real, one would only have to point them to the New Orleans Saints and the consequences of their actions in order to disprove their theory. The Saints this year have lost 14 free agents and have only been able to re sign 4 guys. Of course, some of the guys they lost, like Michael Thomas and Jimmy Graham, were expected. They were older, underperforming guys that were likely to get cut. But they've also lost guys like Andrus Keith and Zach Bond and Lonnie Johnson, who were quality contributors for this team. The guys they did re-sign were Demario Davis. He got a new 2-year deal. Willie Gay Jr. Signed for a 1-year deal. Tyron Mathieu signed a new 2-year deal. And then they brought in Cedric Wilson. To be honest, I don't expect New Orleans to do much else here in free agency. the bill has obviously come due for them after years of trying to compete, both in Drew Brees' final years and then afterwards as they began to transition towards this inevitable rebuild. Um, but it's not great for the team to be losing quality guys because their cap situation is absolutely terrible. And they really aren't able to do much in free agency as a result. I'll give the Saints a D. They're not in a great situation. Uh, Clearly, they're really not going to be able to do much more here. And for the most part, their free agency has been about losing talent rather than bringing in new talent to replace them. Tampa Bay has had a pretty active offseason as they look to keep their throne atop the NFC South. They re signed quarterback Baker Mayfield to a 3 year, $100 million deal. That's a big win for them. Baker was highly desired on the free agent market after a pretty decent 2023 season. They re signed Mike Evans on a 2 year deal. Really seems like the future Hall of Famer is going to retire as a Buck. Good for him. Good for the team. Lavonte David re-signed with the team. Cornerback Bryce Hall also agreed to sign with the team. Jordan Whitehead signed a 2 year deal. Antoine Winfield Jr. Got the franchise tag. Uh, Bucks did lose Shaq Barrett to the Dolphins, Devin White to the Eagles. Carlton Davis was traded to the Lions. But overall, Tampa was able to keep their four guys around as they looked to make another run in the playoffs in 2024. I think it's a pretty good free agency for them. They haven't added a ton of guys, but their free agency focus for them was not about that. I'll give the Bucks here a solid B. I think they've done a pretty good job so far. At the end of the 2023 season, I noted that the Cardinals would look to build up their culture from what they've already been able to accomplish. This extended into free agency. They added guys to provide a lot of depth, like Jonah Williams, Bilal Nichols, Mac Wilson, Sean Murphy Bunting. They traded for quarterback Desmond Ritter. He's an interesting project, although I'm not sure how much will come out of that. They lost guys like Marquise Brown and Rondell Moore, Geoff Swaim, DJ Humphreys. It's going to be interesting to see what the Cardinals do here in the draft. Aside from Sean Murphy, Bunting, and Jonah Williams, I'm not sure that they brought in a ton of high impact guys, but they did bring in a lot of depth to the team. I think they'll continue to build up their foundation. And guys like this free agent class are going to be very important in doing that. Cardinals have not made like a huge splash here. Not like anyone super notable signed with the team, but I think they've done a good job so far at continuing to build themselves up going into year two of the John Gannon era. I'll give the Cardinals here a B minus. For free agency, the LA Rams lost some guys like Jordan Fuller, John Johnson in the backfield of the defense, Troy Reeder at linebacker, Bryson Hopkins at tight end. Who else? Oh, yeah, defensive tackle, Aaron Donald, who retired. Rough offseason for LA Rams fans, particularly on the departure side. That being said, they did bring in Jonah Jackson on a 3 year deal. I really, really like that signing a lot. They bring in Jimmy Garoppolo as a backup, re-signed Demarcus Robinson, signed Colby Parkinson. But I mean, they lost Aaron Donald to retirement. There's really not much else to say here. That's the defining thing for the LA Rams in free agency. And now they're going to have to find some way to replace him, most likely in the draft. Could we see LA use its first round pick, the first one it's had since they drafted Jared Goff on a defensive tackle? Who knows? For now, I'll give the Rams a C. I think all things considered, prior to the Aaron Donald retirement, they were having a okay free agency. They didn't do anything too crazy. Of course, the Aaron Donald retirement hurts, but I can't really pin that one on the Rams here now, can I? The reigning NFC champions have made a couple splash moves in free agency, particularly signing edge rusher Leonard Floyd to a 2-year deal and trading for defensive tackle Malik Collins. They also added Devondre Campbell at linebacker, and John Feliciano re-signed on a 1-year deal on the offensive line. Just a couple of the highlights there. But for the most part, the San Francisco 49ers are losing a lot of talent, particularly on the defense, where they lose Clelin Ferrell, Randy Gregory, Chase Young on the edge, Eric Armstead to the Jaguars on the defensive line, Sebastian Joseph Day, Javon Kinlaw goes to the Jets, Oren Burks at linebacker, Isaiah Oliver, cornerback also goes to the Jets, John Gibson and Logan Ryan at safety. That's a starting defense for a lot of teams. A lot of those players are really good. San Francisco was bound to lose some talent on the offense. They have guys like Brent Ayuk, Debo, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. The bill has got to come due for them on that side. So losing a lot of these guys makes sense. That being said, they lost a lot of defensive depth. And because of that, I'm not sure how they're going to go about replacing those guys or if they're going to be able to have quite the year like they did last year. That being said, the Leonard Floyd signing is good. Malik Collins trade was great. Adding some guys on the offensive line, I think, is also good. I'm going to give the 49ers C plus here. They didn't do a ton to mitigate a lot of the losses they have, but the few moves they did make, I think, are pretty good. And of course, is the San Francisco 49ers. I'm sure they're going to bring in more talent as free agency goes on into the later stages and into the draft. The Seattle Seahawks had a very interesting free agency so far. They bring in quarterback Sam Howell on an absolutely fascinating trade with the Washington Commanders. He could possibly compete for the starting job if Geno slips up. They re-sign tight end Noah Fant, bring in Pharaoh Brown as well. Sign George Fant on the offensive line. That's huge. Defensive end Leonard Williams re-signs. Great for them. Cornerback Artie Burns resigns. Rayshawn Jenkins signs with the team at safety. Of course, they lost guys like Devin Bush, Bobby Wagner, linebacker Jamal Adams, and Quandre Diggs at safety are gone. Evan Brown at center, Mario Edwards on the defensive line. Will Dissly at tight end, Jason Peters, offensive tackle, Jake Curhan on the offensive line. But I like the names they brought in: Leonard Williams, Nick Harris, George Fant, Noah Fant, Pharaoh Brown. Really find the Sam Howell trade very interesting. Artie Burns and Rayshawn Jenkins are great additions to the secondary. I think Seattle is doing a good job in their first season without Pete Carroll in bringing in new talent for their new coaching staff. I'll give them a B plus here. And there you have it. That's our breakdown of what's gone on in NFL free agency so far in 2024. If you liked what you saw, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and as always, we will catch you in the next one.